Imagine being stood up on Christmas Eve, sitting alone in a restaurant while everyone around you celebrates love and togetherness. That's exactly what happened to Julia, until a stranger in a red coat changed everything with 5 simple words. "Can I talk to you?" What started as the worst night of her life became the beginning of something she never saw coming. Before we dive into this heartwarming story, please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The restaurant was buzzing with Christmas cheer, but Julia's table felt like an island of disappointment. I checked my phone for the 20th time in 10 minutes. 8:47 p.m. David was supposed to be here an hour and 17 minutes ago. The waiter kept glancing at my table with that look. You know the one. Pity, mixed with barely concealed impatience. I'd ordered a glass of wine just to have something to do with my hands, but it sat there untouched, getting warmer by the minute while I pretended to study the menu I'd already memorized. Christmas lights twinkled outside the window of Romano's Italian restaurant, casting red and green shadows across the pristine white tablecloth. Couples laughed at nearby tables, sharing desserts and stolen kisses under the mistletoe hanging from the ceiling. The whole scene felt like a cruel joke designed specifically to highlight my pathetic situation. My phone buzzed against the table, finally. "Hey, Julia. So sorry, but I can't make it tonight. Family emergency came up suddenly. Rain check? David." I stared at the text message, my heart sinking into my stomach like a stone dropped in deep water. Family emergency. Right. I'd seen David's Instagram story exactly 23 minutes ago. Him at Murphy's bar downtown with his college buddies. Definitely not dealing with any emergency, unless you counted running out of craft beer and having to switch to domestic. The waiter approached my table again, his professional smile not quite hiding his irritation. "Miss, would you like to order something to eat? Or perhaps another drink?" "Actually, I think I'll just get the check for the wine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded sympathetically and walked away, probably relieved to finally clear the table that had been occupied by a single, increasingly pathetic woman for over an hour. I sat there, frozen in my chair like a deer caught in headlights. This was supposed to be different. My friend Sarah had sworn up and down that David was absolutely perfect for me. "He's funny, he's sweet, he's got a great job, and he's been asking about you for weeks," she'd said with the confidence of someone who'd never been stood up in her life. Apparently, not sweet enough to actually show up for our date. The couple at the table directly next to me burst into delighted laughter. The woman was wearing a sparkly red dress that caught the light every time she moved, her eyes bright with joy as her partner slid a small, elegantly wrapped box across the table between their empty dinner plates. "Merry Christmas, beautiful," he said, his voice warm with affection. I felt tears prick my eyes, hot and embarrassing. This was absolutely pathetic. I was pathetic. 28 years old, sitting alone in a crowded restaurant on Christmas Eve, stood up by a guy I'd never even met in person. My sister Emma was probably right when she joked last week that maybe I should just adopt 3 cats and call it a life. I grabbed my purse from the back of my chair and started to stand up, ready to make my escape to my apartment where I could cry into a pint of Ben & Jerry's like a normal person, when I heard a gentle voice behind me. "Excuse me, can I talk to you?" I turned around to see a woman in an elegant red wool coat standing beside my table. She had kind, intelligent eyes and silver hair pulled back in a sophisticated low bun. Something about her presence felt immediately calming, like being wrapped in a warm blanket on a cold day. "I'm sorry," I said, confused and slightly embarrassed that a stranger had witnessed my public humiliation. She smiled warmly, and I noticed she had the kind of smile that reached her eyes. "I know this might sound strange, but I've been watching you from across the restaurant for the past hour, and you look like you could use some company." My first instinct was to politely decline and escape to my apartment where I could wallow in self-pity privately, but something in her voice, something genuine and caring, stopped me from immediately brushing her off. "I was actually just leaving," I stammered, gesturing vaguely toward the door. "Were you?" she asked gently, tilting her head slightly. "Or were you about to spend Christmas Eve alone in your apartment, wondering what's wrong with you when the answer is absolutely nothing?" I blinked at her, stunned by her directness and the accuracy of her observation. How could a complete stranger read me so easily? It was like she could see straight through all my carefully constructed defenses. "I'm Helena," she said, extending her hand with a confident gesture. And I have a feeling we both need this conversation more than either of us realizes. I looked at her outstretched hand, then at the empty chair across from me where David should have been sitting, sharing stories and getting to know each other. What did I have to lose at this point? My dignity was already in complete shambles. I'm Julia, I said, shaking her hand and noticing how warm and soft her skin was. And honestly, I have absolutely no idea what I need right now. Helena's smile grew wider, transforming her entire face. Well then, that's the perfect place to start, don't you think? She slipped off her elegant coat, revealing a beautiful burgundy sweater, and sat down across from me. Suddenly, the restaurant didn't feel quite so lonely anymore. But I had no idea that this mysterious stranger was about to turn my entire world completely upside down. Helena settled into the chair across from me like she had been meant to sit there all along, her movements graceful and confident. The waiter appeared almost instantly. Funny how service improved dramatically when you weren't sitting alone looking pathetic and desperate. 2 glasses of your finest red wine, please, Helena said without even glancing at the menu, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of knowing exactly what she wanted. And we'll need a few minutes to look over the dinner options. We? I asked, raising an eyebrow in surprise. Unless you have somewhere else you need to be tonight, she replied with a knowing smile that suggested she already knew the answer. I didn't. And somehow, she seemed to understand that better than I understood it myself. So, Helena said, leaning forward slightly and folding her hands on the table, tell me about the man who was supposed to be sitting in this chair tonight. How did you possibly— Honey, I've been exactly where you are right now, she interrupted gently. The obsessive phone checking every 30 seconds, the forced smile for the waiter who keeps hovering, the internal debate about whether to order food or just run away and hide. She paused as the waiter efficiently set down our wine glasses. Plus, you're dressed far too nicely for a solo dinner on Christmas Eve. I looked down at my navy blue dress, the one I'd spent over an hour carefully selecting, the one that was supposed to make David think I was effortlessly beautiful and charming. His name is David, I said, taking a tentative sip of the wine and finding it surprisingly excellent. Well, was David, past tense now, I suppose, blind date? The absolute blindest. My friend Sarah set it up with all the confidence of a professional matchmaker. She insisted he was perfect for me. I made exaggerated air quotes with my fingers. Turns out his idea of perfect timing involves not showing up at all. Helena nodded thoughtfully, swirling her wine with practiced ease. And let me take a wild guess. You're sitting here wondering what's fundamentally wrong with you instead of what's obviously wrong with him. The brutal accuracy of her statement hit me like a physical slap across the face. Maybe, I admitted reluctantly. I mean, this isn't exactly my first experience with romantic disappointment. There was Marcus last spring who conveniently forgot to mention he was married until our 3rd date. And before that, Jake, who decided halfway through dinner that he was still emotionally processing his relationship with his ex-girlfriend. Ah, the classic emotional unavailability excuse, Helena said, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Extremely popular with men these days, I've noticed. I found myself laughing despite the circumstances. You sound like you're speaking from extensive personal experience. 35 years of it, actually, she said, her expression growing more serious. Though I'll admit, my dating disasters were quite a bit different from yours in some fundamental ways. Something in her tone made me intensely curious. Different how, exactly? Helena took a long, deliberate sip of wine, seeming to carefully consider her words before speaking. Well, for starters, I spent the majority of my adult life pretending to be someone I absolutely wasn't, dating men I thought I should want instead of— She trailed off meaningfully, then shook her head. But that's definitely a story for later in the evening. Right now, I want to hear much more about Julia. There's honestly not much to tell, I said, feeling suddenly self-conscious under her intense, interested gaze. I'm a freelance graphic designer. I live alone in a tiny apartment with a houseplant I'm slowly but surely killing, and apparently I'm the type of person who gets stood up on Christmas Eve. Stop that immediately, Helena said with surprising firmness. Stop what? The self-deprecating routine. It's not charming, and more importantly, it's not remotely true. She leaned forward, her voice becoming gentle but absolutely serious. "You're a beautiful, intelligent woman who took a chance on meeting someone new tonight. The fact that he was too immature and inconsiderate to show up says absolutely everything about his character and absolutely nothing about yours." I felt unexpected tears threatening again, but for a completely different reason this time. When was the last time someone had spoken to me like that? Like I actually mattered? Like I was worth defending? "Why are you being so incredibly nice to me?" I asked quietly. "You don't even know me." Helena's smile became tinged with sadness. "Because exactly 25 years ago, I was sitting in a restaurant very much like this one, waiting for someone who never bothered to show up. And absolutely nobody came over to talk to me. I went home that night, cried myself to sleep, and decided that maybe I simply wasn't meant for love after all. What happened to you? I spent the next 2 decades settling for safe, predictable choices and constantly wondering, what if?" She raised her glass toward me. "I'm absolutely not going to let you make the same devastating mistake I did." We clinked glasses, and I felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. Like a door I didn't even realize was locked had just cracked open for the first time. "So, what do you say we order some actual food and you tell me what you genuinely want out of life?" Helena asked, her eyes sparkling. "Not what you think you should want based on everyone else's expectations. What you really, truly want for yourself." I looked at this mysterious, captivating woman who had appeared out of absolutely nowhere and somehow managed to make me feel less alone than I had felt in months. "I want to feel like I actually matter to someone," I said quietly, the honesty surprising even me. Helena reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand, her touch sending unexpected warmth up my arm. "You already do," she said with absolute conviction. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I found myself believing it might actually be true. The food arrived with perfect timing. Helena had somehow managed to order for both of us without asking, instinctively knowing I'd want the grilled salmon with lemon butter sauce. "How did you possibly know that's what I wanted?" I asked, cutting into the perfectly cooked fish that was exactly what I'd been craving without realizing it. "Lucky guess," she said, but her mysterious smile suggested there was much more to it than simple luck. "So, Julia, the freelance graphic designer who's slowly committing plant murder. What else should I know about you?" I laughed, feeling more relaxed than I had all evening. "That's pretty much the extent of my exciting life story, honestly. I seriously doubt that's true. What kind of design work do you do?" "Mostly marketing materials for small local businesses, brochures, websites, social media graphics, nothing particularly glamorous or artistic." I shrugged dismissively. I wanted to be a real artist once upon a time, but life had other plans. "What kind of artist did you want to be?" "A painter, actually. I used to absolutely love working with watercolors especially. There was something almost magical about the way the colors would bleed into each other, creating something completely unexpected and beautiful." I realized I was rambling enthusiastically and stopped abruptly. "Sorry, I don't usually talk about that stuff anymore." "Why not?" Helena asked, her voice gentle but probing. "Because it sounds incredibly silly and impractical. Dreaming about art when I should be focused on realistic things like paying rent and building a stable career." Helena set down her fork and looked at me with laser-like intensity. "Who told you that your dreams were silly?" "What do you mean?" "Who specifically told you that your artistic passions didn't matter and weren't worth pursuing?" I thought about it for a moment, feeling uncomfortable. My ex-boyfriend, mostly, Ryan. He used to say I needed to grow up and face reality instead of wasting time on childish fantasies. "And how long were you with this charming individual?" 3 years, I admitted, feeling embarrassed. 3 entire years of someone systematically telling you that your deepest passions and dreams didn't matter. Helena shook her head with obvious disgust. "No wonder you're sitting here tonight thinking you're not worth showing up for." The observation stung, because it was absolutely, brutally true. "What about you?" I asked, desperate to deflect attention from my own pathetic romantic history. "What do you do for work?" "I'm a licensed therapist," Helena said matter-of-factly. "Well, I was until I retired last year after 30 years of practice." That explained so much. The way she could read people instantly. The gentle but direct questioning style, the ability to make me feel completely understood. What was your specialty? Relationships, primarily, helping people figure out why they kept choosing the wrong partners or staying in situations that made them fundamentally miserable. She paused, taking a sip of wine. Deeply ironic, considering I spent the majority of my own life doing exactly those things. Choosing the wrong partners? Helena nodded slowly. I was married for 15 years to a man named Robert. Wonderful man, stable job. Everything looked absolutely perfect on paper to everyone who knew us. What happened between you two? I was completely miserable, she said with startling simplicity. Not because he was terrible. He absolutely wasn't. But because I was living an elaborate lie every single day, trying desperately to be the wife I thought I should be, instead of the person I actually was deep down. I waited patiently for her to continue, sensing there was much more to this story. The truth is, Julia, I never should have married Robert in the first place. I knew it even as I walked down that aisle in my white dress, smiling for all the wedding photos. But it was 1985, and women like me, well, we didn't have very many socially acceptable options back then. Women like you? I asked softly. Helena met my eyes directly. Women who fell in love with other women. The words hung in the air between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I was ready to cross. I felt my breath catch, not from shock exactly, but from a strange sense of recognition I couldn't quite identify or name. I spent 15 long years pretending to be heterosexual, Helena continued, her voice steady but filled with old pain. 15 years wondering why I felt so empty inside, why physical intimacy felt like I was acting in a play, why I kept looking at other women and feeling things I couldn't allow myself to explain or understand. When did you finally figure it out? I always knew, somewhere deep down in my heart, but actually admitting it to myself, that took until I was 43 years old. She smiled sadly. The night I finally told Robert the truth about who I really was turned out to be the first time I'd been completely honest about myself in decades. How did he react? Much better than I expected, honestly. He said he'd always sensed that something fundamental was missing between us, but he'd assumed it was somehow his fault. Helena's eyes grew distant with memory. We divorced amicably 6 months later. He remarried 2 years after that. A lovely woman named Patricia who actually loves him the way he deserves to be loved. I found myself leaning forward, completely absorbed in her story. And what about you? What happened after the divorce? I spent the next several years learning how to live authentically for the first time in my adult life, dating women, discovering who I was outside of other people's expectations and assumptions. She looked directly at me. It was simultaneously terrifying and wonderful and the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. Do you regret it? The marriage, I mean. I regret the deception, Helena said thoughtfully. I regret the years we both lost living a lie, but I don't regret the journey that brought me to where I am today. Which is where exactly? She smiled, and something in her expression made my heart skip a beat. Sitting in a restaurant on Christmas Eve, talking to a beautiful young woman who reminds me so much of myself at her age. Something in the way she said beautiful made my pulse quicken unexpectedly. Helena, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. Why are you really here tonight? She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with those intelligent, perceptive eyes. Because, she said finally, sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be, exactly when you need to be there. What do you mean, exactly where I need to be? I asked, my heart beating noticeably faster. Helena smiled and gestured gracefully toward the large window beside our table. Look around, Julia. Really look at everything. I followed her gaze obediently. The restaurant had transformed dramatically as the evening progressed around us. The Christmas lights seemed brighter somehow, casting a warm, golden glow over everything and everyone. Snow had started falling outside in thick, perfect flakes, creating an absolutely magical winter wonderland scene straight out of a holiday movie. It's incredibly beautiful, I admitted, watching couples walk by hand in hand under the streetlights. It is beautiful, but that's not exactly what I meant. Helena turned back to me, her eyes sparkling. I meant look at yourself. When I first noticed you sitting here alone, you were hunched over defensively, trying to make yourself as invisible as possible. Now you're sitting up straight, your eyes are bright and engaged, and you're actually smiling genuinely. I touched my face instinctively, surprised to discover she was absolutely right. I guess I am smiling. That's what happens when someone actually sees you for who you really are, Helena said softly, her voice carrying layers of meaning. The waiter appeared to refill our wine glasses with practiced efficiency. How's everything this evening, ladies? Absolutely perfect, Helena said, never taking her eyes off me. After he left, I found myself studying Helena's face more carefully. She had subtle laugh lines around her eyes, and a small, barely visible scar on her chin that somehow made her more beautiful, rather than less. There was something undeniably magnetic about her quiet confidence, the way she seemed completely comfortable in her own skin. "Can I ask you something personal?" I said, gathering my courage. "You can ask me anything at all. When you came out, how did you know for certain? I mean, really know deep down?" Helena considered the question seriously. "Have you ever felt like you were sleepwalking through your own life?" I nodded immediately, the recognition hitting me like a physical force. That's exactly how I felt with men. Like I was going through all the expected motions, saying all the right things, but never really connecting on any meaningful level. Never feeling that spark everyone talks about in songs and movies. And with women? The first time I kissed a woman, I finally understood what all those love songs were actually about. Helena's eyes grew soft and distant with the memory. It was like coming home to myself after being lost for decades. I felt something flutter unexpectedly in my chest. Recognition, maybe, or possibility, or something I couldn't quite name yet. What was her name? Catherine. She was a colleague at the mental health clinic where I worked. We'd been close friends for several months, and I kept telling myself that the way I felt around her was just intense friendship. Helena laughed softly. I was incredibly naive about my own feelings. "What happened between you two?" "We were working late one evening and she looked up from her patient files and said, completely out of nowhere, 'Helena, are you happy with your life?' Just like that. No context, no warning." "What did you say?" I started crying, right there in the middle of the office, surrounded by case files and psychology textbooks. Because the honest answer was absolutely not, and I'd never admitted that truth out loud before. I could picture it perfectly. Helena, younger and more vulnerable, finally cracking under the weight of living such an elaborate lie. "She held me while I cried," Helena continued, her voice growing tender. "And when I finally stopped, she kissed me. Gentle, tentative, like she was asking a question she wasn't sure she wanted answered. And I kissed her back like my entire life depended on it." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of her story settling between us like something precious and fragile. "Are you still together?" I asked quietly. Helena's expression grew genuinely sad. "No. Catherine wanted me to leave Robert immediately, start a completely new life together. But I was terrified. I kept making excuses, saying I needed more time to figure everything out." "What happened?" "She got tired of waiting for me to be brave. She met someone else who was ready to be out and proud." Helena sighed deeply. "I don't blame her at all. I wasn't ready to choose love over fear yet." "Do you regret it?" "Every single day. But it taught me something absolutely crucial. When you find someone who makes you feel truly alive, you don't hesitate. You don't make excuses or wait for the perfect moment. You choose love, period." The way she said it, looking directly into my eyes, made my pulse quicken dramatically. "Helena," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "why are you telling me all of this?" She reached across the table and took my hand gently. Her fingers were warm and soft, and the simple touch sent electricity shooting up my entire arm. "Because I've been watching you all evening, and I see something very specific in your eyes when you look at me." My breath caught in my throat. "What do you see?" "Recognition," she said simply. "The same look I used to see in my own mirror, when I was trying desperately to figure out why nothing in my life felt quite right." I stared down at our joined hands, my mind racing with possibilities I'd never allowed myself to consider before. Was she right? Was that why David's absence hadn't really hurt? Because I'd never been genuinely excited about him in the first place? "I don't know," I whispered honestly. "You don't have to know everything right now," Helena said gently. But you don't have to pretend anymore either. Not with me. I looked up at her face, at those kind, intelligent eyes that seemed to see straight through every defense I'd ever built, and felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. I started, then stopped, unsure how to finish. Never what? Never felt this way about a woman before. Helena smiled warmly. How do you feel right now, in this moment? I thought about it with complete honesty. Scared. Confused. But also, I paused, searching for exactly the right word. Alive. That's a very good start, Helena said, squeezing my hand gently. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, and the restaurant was gradually starting to empty as couples headed home to continue their Christmas Eve celebrations in private. What happens now? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Helena's thumb traced slowly across my knuckles, and I shivered with unexpected pleasure. Now, she said, we see where this takes us. There's something important I need to tell you, Helena said, her voice suddenly becoming serious and careful. My stomach dropped immediately. Here it comes, I thought with growing dread. The catch. The reason this was all too good to be true. Okay, I said, trying desperately to keep my voice steady and calm. Helena released my hand and sat back in her chair, creating distance between us. For the first time all evening, she looked genuinely nervous, almost vulnerable. I wasn't just randomly at this restaurant tonight, Julia. What do you mean exactly? She took a deep, shaky breath. I've been coming here every Christmas Eve for the past 3 years. Same table, same exact time. I frowned, completely confused. Why would you do that? Because this is where I had my last real conversation with my daughter, before she stopped speaking to me entirely. The words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. You have a daughter? Had. Have. It's complicated. Helena's eyes filled with tears that she tried unsuccessfully to blink away. Her name is Sarah. She's 31 years old, married to a wonderful man, has 2 beautiful children I've never been allowed to meet. Sarah. The name rang a bell somewhere in my memory, but I couldn't quite place why it seemed familiar. What happened between you two? When I came out, when I finally divorced Robert, Sarah didn't take it well at all. She was 26, already married and settled, and she felt like I'd been lying to her about everything her entire life. But surely she understood eventually. No, Helena said firmly, cutting me off. She didn't understand. She said I was being selfish, that I'd destroyed our family for what she called a midlife crisis phase. She accused me of abandoning her father, of making a complete mockery of everything she believed about love and marriage and family. I reached instinctively for Helena's hand, but she pulled away from my touch. The last thing she said to me was that she never wanted to see me again, that as far as she was concerned, I was dead to her. Helena's voice broke completely. That was exactly 3 years ago tonight. Right here, at this very table. Helena, I'm so incredibly sorry. I keep coming back here, hoping against hope that maybe she'll change her mind. Maybe she'll walk through that door and give me just one chance to explain everything. She laughed bitterly. Pathetic, right? It's not pathetic at all. It's love. Helena looked at me with genuine surprise. You're a mother who misses her daughter desperately, I continued with conviction. That's not pathetic. That's heartbreaking and beautiful, and completely understandable. We sat in heavy silence for a moment, the weight of her confession settling between us like something fragile and precious. Is that why you approached me tonight? I asked quietly, dreading the answer. Because I reminded you of her somehow. No, Helena said quickly, then paused. Well, maybe initially. You have similar hair color, the same way of sitting when you're upset. But Julia, what I feel when I look at you, that has absolutely nothing to do with Sarah. What do you feel? Helena met my eyes directly. Hope, genuine attraction, the possibility of something real and meaningful. My heart hammered against my ribs. Even though I'm completely confused about everything? Especially because you're confused. It means you're being honest with yourself. Maybe for the first time in your life. I thought about that carefully. About Ryan telling me my art was silly and impractical. About David not bothering to show up. About all the countless times I'd felt like I was acting in my own life instead of actually living it. Helena, I said slowly. What if I'm not? What if I can't be what you need? What do you think I need? Someone who knows exactly who she is. Someone brave enough to live authentically, no matter what the cost. Helena smiled sadly. Julia, I'm 68 years old. I spent 43 years living an elaborate lie, and I've spent the last 25 trying desperately to make up for all that lost time. What I need isn't someone perfect. What I need is someone real and honest. I don't feel very real most of the time. You feel completely real to me. The waiter approached our table hesitantly. Ladies, I hate to interrupt, but we're closing in about 15 minutes. Of course, Helena said, reaching immediately for her purse. Let me take care of this. No, I said firmly, putting my hand over hers. Let me pay. It's honestly the least I can do after you saved my Christmas Eve from complete disaster. You saved mine too, Helena said softly, her eyes glistening. As I paid the check, I found myself thinking intensely about Sarah, about a daughter who couldn't accept her mother's truth, about the pain Helena must carry with her every single day. Can I ask you something? I said, as we put on our coats. Anything at all. Do you regret coming out, knowing what it cost you with Sarah? Helena was quiet for a long moment, clearly considering her answer carefully. I regret the timing, she said finally. I regret waiting so long that Sarah felt betrayed and lied to. But living authentically, being true to who I really am? No, I could never regret that. We walked toward the door together, and I felt the magical evening slipping away like sand through my fingers. Julia, Helena said as we reached the entrance. I know this is overwhelming. I know you're probably confused and scared and maybe questioning everything you thought you knew about yourself. I nodded. All of that was absolutely true. But I also know that what happened between us tonight was real and meaningful, and I'd very much like to see you again, if you're willing to take that risk. I looked at this extraordinary woman who had appeared out of nowhere and turned my entire world upside down. This woman who had seen something in me that I was only beginning to recognize in myself. Yes, I said, surprising myself with how certain and confident I sounded. I'd like that very much too. Helena smiled, and it was like watching the sun come out after a storm. Good, she said warmly, because I have something very special I want to show you. And what do you want to show me? I asked, as we stepped out into the snowy Christmas Eve night. My art studio, Helena said, her breath creating small clouds in the cold air. It's just a few blocks from here, if you don't mind walking. I hesitated for a moment. Going to her place felt like crossing a significant line I wasn't entirely sure I was ready to cross. Helena must have sensed my uncertainty immediately. Just to talk more privately, she said gently, reassuringly. And because I think you'll genuinely appreciate what I do there. What do you do there? Paint, she said with a mysterious smile. Watercolors, mostly. My heart skipped several beats. You paint watercolors? Started about 5 years ago, right after I retired from therapy practice. Turns out I had decades of emotions to work through, and traditional therapy only goes so far when you're the therapist. We walked through the quiet, snow-covered streets, our footsteps crunching softly on the fresh powder. The Christmas lights strung between lampposts cast everything in a magical, ethereal glow that made the whole world look like a fairy tale. Helena, I said, as we turned onto a tree-lined residential street. Can I ask you something deeply personal? Haven't you been doing exactly that all evening? She teased gently. When you first realized you were attracted to women, were you terrified? Absolutely terrified, she said immediately, without hesitation. Not just of what other people would think or say, but of what it meant about everything I thought I knew about myself and my life. How did you get through it? One day at a time, one honest conversation at a time, one small act of courage at a time. We stopped in front of a charming Victorian house with a wraparound porch and warm, inviting light glowing from multiple windows. This is home, Helena said with obvious pride. It's absolutely beautiful. Thank you. I bought it right after the divorce, the first place that was ever truly, completely mine. She led me up the porch steps and unlocked the front door. The inside was even more beautiful than the outside. Polished hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves covering entire walls, and original artwork covering every available surface. Did you paint all of these? I asked, staring in amazement at a stunning watercolor of a sunset over calm water. Most of them. Painting became my primary therapy after Sarah and I, after everything fell apart between us. I moved slowly from piece to piece, completely amazed by the raw emotion captured in each brushstroke. There were landscapes, abstract pieces, portraits, and compositions that seemed to pulse with life and feeling. Helena, these are absolutely incredible. Thank you. That means more than you know. Come on, let me show you where the real magic happens. She led me through the house to a sun-filled room at the back. Multiple easels stood at different angles. Canvases in various stages of completion scattered around the space. The smell of paint and turpentine filled the air, bringing back memories of my own abandoned artistic dreams. This is where I spend most of my time these days, Helena said. I walked around the room slowly, taking everything in. On one easel was a painting that made me stop completely in my tracks. It was a woman sitting alone at a restaurant table, her face turned toward a window. The loneliness was absolutely palpable. But there was something else too, a sense of waiting, of possibility hanging in the air. Is this you? Helena said softly, moving to stand beside me. I started it tonight, working entirely from memory. I stared at the painting, seeing myself through her eyes. I looked sad, yes, but also beautiful, in a way I'd never recognized before. When did you have time to paint this? I didn't paint it with my hands. I painted it from here, she said, touching her chest gently. From how you looked when I first saw you, and how I felt when I realized I absolutely had to talk to you. Tears pricked my eyes unexpectedly. Why did you have to talk to me? Helena moved closer, close enough that I could smell her subtle perfume and feel the warmth radiating from her body. Because I recognized something in you that I'd been searching for my entire life. What? A kindred spirit. Someone else who was tired of pretending to be someone she wasn't. I turned to face her fully, and suddenly we were standing very close. I could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, could count the laugh lines that made her face so expressive and beautiful. Helena, I whispered. Yes? I think I'm falling for you. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Honest and terrifying and absolutely true. Helena's face lit up with pure joy. Are you? Yes, and it scares me to death. Good, she said, reaching up to cup my face gently in her hands. The best things in life should scare you at least a little. What if I'm not brave enough for this? You are, she said with absolute certainty. You're here, aren't you? You're being honest about how you feel. That's the bravest thing anyone can do. I leaned into her touch, feeling more like myself than I had in years. Can I kiss you? Helena asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The moment that would change everything about how I understood myself. Yes, I breathed. Helena leaned in slowly, giving me plenty of time to change my mind. But I didn't want to change my mind. I wanted this more than I'd ever wanted anything in my entire life. When her lips touched mine, it was like coming home to a place I'd never been before. Soft, gentle, perfect. Everything I'd been missing without even knowing I was missing it. When we finally broke apart, I was completely breathless. Wow, I whispered. Helena smiled. Good wow or bad wow? The absolute best wow, I said, and kissed her again. This time, I was the one who initiated it, and Helena responded with a soft sigh that made my knees weak and my heart race. When we separated, she rested her forehead against mine. Julia, she said quietly, I want you to know that whatever this becomes, there's absolutely no pressure. We can take this as slowly as you need. Slow. Helena's eyes darkened with desire. Then we don't. I looked around the studio, at the paintings that showed Helena's soul, at this woman who had seen me when I couldn't even see myself clearly. I want to stay, I said decisively, tonight, if that's okay with you. Are you absolutely sure? I thought about David, who couldn't even be bothered to show up. About Ryan, who had made me feel small and insignificant. About all the times I'd settled for far less than I deserved. I'm sure, I said with growing confidence. For the first time in my life, I'm completely sure about something. Helena smiled and took my hand gently. Then stay, she said. Stay as long as you want. I woke up to brilliant sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the rich, comforting smell of freshly brewed coffee drifting from somewhere else in the house. For a moment, I was completely disoriented, unsure where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then the memories came flooding back in vivid detail. Helena, the restaurant, the kiss, the night we'd spent talking until dawn, curled up together on her incredibly comfortable couch, sharing stories and gentle touches and discovering each other. I'd never felt so safe and understood with another human being in my entire life. "Good morning, beautiful," Helena said from the doorway, holding 2 steaming mugs and looking absolutely radiant. "Good morning," I said, sitting up and accepting the coffee gratefully. "What time is it?" "Almost noon. Merry Christmas, by the way." Christmas. I'd completely forgotten it was actually Christmas Day. "Merry Christmas to you too," I said, smiling widely. "This is definitely not how I expected to spend it. Better or worse than your original plan?" I thought about it seriously. My original plan had been to go home alone, eat leftover Chinese takeout, and watch romantic comedies while feeling sorry for myself and wondering what was wrong with me. Infinitely, impossibly better, I said with complete honesty. Helena sat down beside me on the couch, and I automatically curled into her side. It felt natural and right, like we'd been doing this for years instead of hours. "Julia," she said softly, "how are you feeling about everything? About us?" I considered the question carefully and honestly. How was I feeling? Scared, I said truthfully, but also free. Like I've been holding my breath my entire life, and I can finally exhale properly. And about us specifically, I turned to look at her directly. In the morning light, she was even more beautiful than she'd been the night before. Her hair was mussed from sleep, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. But she looked absolutely radiant and alive. "I think I'm falling in love with you," I said, the words coming easier this time. "Actually, I think I already have fallen in love with you." Helena's face broke into a brilliant, transformative smile. "I love you too," she said without hesitation. "I know it seems crazy, I know we just met, but it's not crazy," I interrupted firmly. "Or maybe it is completely crazy, but I don't care anymore." We kissed then, soft and sweet and full of promise and possibility. When we broke apart, Helena had tears in her eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked, immediately concerned. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. I never thought I'd feel this way again." "What way?" "Hopeful," she said simply. "Like the best parts of my life might still be ahead of me instead of behind me." I understood exactly what she meant, because I felt the same way. My phone buzzed insistently on the coffee table. A text from Sarah, my friend who had set up the disastrous date with David. "OMG, how did it go with David? I need all the details immediately." I showed Helena the message, and we both burst into laughter. "What are you going to tell her?" Helena asked, clearly amused. "The truth," I said confidently, "that David never showed up, but I met someone absolutely incredible anyway. Are you ready for those conversations? Coming out isn't always easy, especially when people have assumptions about who you are." I thought about that seriously, about my family, my friends, my co-workers, about all the assumptions people had made about my life and my future. "I'm ready to stop living for other people's expectations," I said with growing conviction. "I'm ready to be myself, whoever that turns out to be." Helena squeezed my hand encouragingly. "It won't always be easy. Will you help me navigate all of this?" "Every single step of the way," she promised. We spent the rest of Christmas Day together, and it was absolutely perfect. Helena cooked an amazing dinner, and I helped as much as someone completely incompetent in the kitchen could help, laughing as I proved my total inability to do anything useful. We exchanged small, meaningful gifts. She gave me a professional set of watercolor paints, and I gave her a small succulent from the flower shop down the street. "For someone who's much better at keeping things alive than I am," I said. As evening approached, I found myself reluctant to leave this perfect bubble we'd created. I should probably go home, I said half-heartedly. Should you? Helena asked gently. Or do you want to? I don't want to, I admitted. But I need to process all of this. Figure out what comes next. What do you think comes next? I looked at this extraordinary woman who had changed my life in a single evening, who had seen me when I couldn't see myself, who had shown me what it felt like to be truly known and accepted. I think, I said slowly, that I want to learn how to paint again. I think I want to have honest conversations with the people I love. I think I want to stop settling for less than I deserve in every area of my life. And us? I think I want to see where this goes. All of it. The scary parts and the beautiful parts and everything in between. Helena smiled warmly. I'd like that very much too. 6 months later, I was standing in Helena's studio, our studio now, putting the finishing touches on my first real painting in years. It was a watercolor of 2 women sitting at a restaurant table, their hands intertwined, Christmas lights twinkling romantically in the background. It's absolutely beautiful, Helena said from behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist. It's our beginning, I said, leaning back against her warmth. One of many, I hope. I turned in her arms and kissed her, still amazed by how right and natural it felt. Definitely one of many, I agreed wholeheartedly. My phone rang. Sarah, my friend, calling for our weekly check-in. She'd been incredibly supportive when I'd come out to her, even apologizing profusely for setting me up with David in the first place. I should take this, I said. Tell her I said hello, Helena said. As I answered the phone, I caught sight of another painting Helena had been working on, a portrait of a young woman with kind eyes and a familiar smile. Her daughter Sarah. Helena was still hoping, still believing that love could bridge any gap, heal any wound, and watching her paint that portrait week after week, I was starting to believe it too. Hi, Sarah, I said into the phone, smiling at Helena. Yes, we're still disgustingly happy. No, I don't regret getting stood up by David. Best thing that ever happened to me. Helena laughed and kissed my cheek tenderly. Sometimes the worst nights lead to the most beautiful beginnings. And sometimes, when you stop looking for love in all the wrong places, it finds you exactly where you need to be.